in Darius, and every year I hope you enjoy one. Every
Out Fiddler. Puts on the step, goes right through, puts on the step again. Oh, goes ready. That was magnificent stuff. Well, they shall not weary them. Parcels gets away, Parcels still going. Mullins opens up again. Oh, look at him go. He beats O'Davis on the outside.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of The Voluntary Tackle, the only NRL podcast promoting cheap Uber rides in the vehicle of Joe Offengowie. I'm your host, Eamon Brown, and today on the show we'll be discussing Michael Cheika's code hop, Israel Folau's New York getaway, Darius Boyd's humiliation, and also how we think the Penrith Panthers will go in 2020. But first, I am joined in the charred remains of a eucalyptus tree by a man who is so damn healthy he once snorted a shredded kale leaf from the anus of a fresh tuna fish. It's of course Xander Risotto. Welcome to the show, mate.
Thanks for having me.
That's all right, mate. Now, a big question about that, I've always wondered, was the tuna alive at the time? Because I think that could be an animal abuse issue.
No idea how to respond to that. There is a Japanese way of killing fish in a way that is more hygienic and makes the flesh last longer.
Okay, so it's not about being humane to the fish.
No, well, actually, it kind of is humane.
Okay,
So,
and is it the same where they basically get the flopping fish and bash its head on the side of the boat?
no, it's more Japanese. It's much more precise, as you can imagine. So there's
Okay.
literally this way of killing fish as opposed to just suffocating them in nets,
Right.
which isn't terribly humane. That they, for practical reasons of storage, caught onto as a seafaring and fish-loving nation, which is called Iki GMA, which they basically will take the fish, the live fish, stab it straight through the brain, then cut its guts out and clean it with fish water. And I know this sounds gross, but it makes the fish last a lot better, and
Right.
it'll like double its sort of fridge life, and it actually tastes better because what happens?
Still going.
You've opened up a can of worms here.
I really have. Please proceed.
But what happens is because the way most fish die is through suffocation, their entire systems get flooded with lactic acid, which actually makes their flesh rot quicker.
I see.
Whereas this, if you just stab them straight through the brain, that never gets a chance to happen. And then if you flush out the blood from their system by cutting their guts open and then flushing them full of water,
Yeah, right.
it actually preserves the meat and it tastes better. There you go, people. If you want to kill a fish, stab it in the brain.
It's a very morbid note to start the NRL podcast on, but I certainly hope the Australian government considers that methodology when it comes to the euthanasia debate, because it sounds extremely humane to just stab the sufferer directly into the cerebral cortex.
From the eyeball.
It's a very violent Rex Hunt methodology, I have to say.
I mean, you could kiss them and throw them back in the ocean, but they probably wouldn't last long.
It's been a couple of weeks since we've been on the show. Have you had any exciting stories for the listeners to share?
I thought that story kind of qualified as something exciting to tell the listeners.
No, mate, don't get the fish story in the brain wrong. I loved it, and I'm sure the listeners loved it too. I just didn't know if you were up to, you'd seen any sporting events or.
I did go to the Sixers game against the Melbourne Renegades.
Yeah, the Renegades. That was a good game.
Yeah, that was great fun.
And,
Watching Steve
this is
Smith.
kind of destroying the illusion. We are great mates off the show, but we both went to that game, but not together.
No.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't invited to your private corporate box.
Mate, we can't all get corporate
You
boxes.
fuckwit.
That's all right, mate. I threw some loose change down off the ledge, which I hope you bought a hot dog with.
No, I don't eat hot dogs.
No, that's right, because you're very healthy. You're too busy breathing in fish anus. You wouldn't want that. Mate, look, for what it's worth, I have a bit of a story for the listeners and yourself, obviously. After work on Thursday, it's obviously the long weekend, it's a big night to go out and get on it a little bit, which is what I decided to do with a couple of work colleagues. But on my way there, I was walking to the pub down King Street, Newtown, and I had my iPod on. iPod, that sounds very
Your
early.
iPod?
I had some tunes going,
Yeah.
basically. And I was listening to a nice 90s mix. Anyway, I've pressed the button at this set of lights, and I may have been very ever so slightly bobbing a little bit to George Michael, right? I think I was bobbing like overtly. I think it was very subtle.
You've been known to do that.
Sometimes the rhythm takes control, as you know. Anyway, so I've locked eyes with this other person in the opposite direction who's waiting at the lights as well. It's this old guy who I could very clearly see was abusing me. right? But I can't hear him because I've got my earphones in. But I've locked eyes. I think he's yelling. Yeah, I can detect the words cunt and fuck a lot coming out of his mouth. And I thought, that's a bit weird. And I thought, I wonder if he's directing it at me. And I looked around and I was the only person waiting to cross. And I thought, oh, well, I won't make a big deal of it. And I sort of looked around and continued listening to my tunes. Anyway, the light goes green. And I look forward again, and he's very clearly still mouthing off at me, potentially because he didn't like my George Michael moves. I don't know. Anyway, as we get closer to each other, he shapes up to be. Like, this is about, I'd say, a 65, 70-year-old man, quite a lot shorter than I was, so I wasn't scared. But he shaped like he was about to pack down in a scrum and almost tried to tackle me. And I remember thinking in that moment, I did the right thing. I stepped aside and let him continue to abuse me, and I walked on. But I remember thinking, what would society say about me if I decided just to put a hit on him in that moment?
Just to uppercut him in the middle of the street as he was crossing the light and let him get run over.
It would have been the wrong thing to do, right?
Because, would it though?
Well, I mean, from my point of view at the time, I thought it was entirely justified. It went through my mind for about half a second.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think I'd really have done it. But it did, and he did have a long neck in one hand. It kind of indicated to me he might be a little bit drunk. Thought, let this one pass. This is the final cap of the story, though, right? Because I was going to get something to eat before I went to the pub. I stopped in at a Ole chicken shop, by the way, great Portuguese chicken for anyone listening. Ordered my burger, sat down at the table. The table happened to be near the big windows, and I've looked out, and he's bailed up someone at the ice cream shop across the road, and he's looking at me and pointing at me and still abusing the fuck out of me. What the fuck did I do to him? All I did was...
It used to be me that attracted the attention of these nutters.
I know. Mate, but for another podcast, we've got to tell them some of your stories over the years. You've had some crackers. But look, we will dive right into topic one. Now, not a club to rest on its laurels, Xander. The Roosters have called in more reinforcements in the wake of Adam O'Brien's departure to the Knights, most notably the appointment of Michael Cheika on a short-term advisory role. Robinson had this to say when asked about the appointment. He said, he's helping to push myself and the assistant coaches to improve and challenge our ideas and help push us again in 2020. So, Xander, my first question to you, mate, is this the right move for the Roosters, given the club's recent successes and Michael Cheika's lack of success recently?
Yeah, I got to admit, when I saw this story, I was concerned. As somebody who does follow rugby as well, I'm very across Michael Cheika's checkered career.
That's right.
Just couldn't help myself. But he is clearly a guy who's got a genuine ability to man manage and get a certain response out of teams. But I think I'm trying to think who he'd be a bit like in the
NRL terms.
Yeah, like he's
Paul McGregor.
No, he'd probably be more. He strikes me as a bit more of a Jeff Tuvey. In a funny sort of way.
So slightly deranged.
Yeah, a little bit deranged.
Punch drunk.
Yeah, like he's the kind of guy that, I think gets passionate out of his team. He yells and screams a lot, and but at the same time he defends his guys and backs them to the hilt. So he's very loyal.
Very loyal to his guys, right?
But a little bit unhinged.
Yeah, well, sometimes you need a bit of that unhinged nature in a coach, don't you? Because you can have people who are too placid, a la Maddie Elliott. Big shout out if you're listening, Maddie, who just seemed a bit too chilled in their role, even when they'd lost 12 in a row. They never really pumped up. You don't want that.
No.
So it's about striking that balance. But, I mean, you've obviously followed the Rugby Union a bit closer than I do. What are his big achievements in the last 12 months, say, for example?
In the last 12 months, there have been no achievements.
Has the cupboard been quite bare? Because that was my impression.
Yeah. No, the Wallabies got bundled out of the World Cup in the quarterfinals by England in pretty embarrassing fashion, and they were pretty awful. He took over in 2015 after... taking the Waratahs to their first title in the history of Super Rugby in 2014. So he had a great... And he'd taken a similar side in Ireland to the European Championship before that.
Right.
So it had this great pedigree of achieving things for a while there. I think,
and then went off the cliff.
And then he stayed as Wallaby coach and basically tried to manage the Australian rugby setup, and it just turned into an absolute debacle. One thing I don't like about him is that he did have this... he really died in a ditch over playing style. Like he had the right, a man with good intentions. He wanted to play expansive running rugby, and he wanted to be entertaining to win back the crowds and all the rest of it. But people don't really care if you're playing running high tempo rugby if you're fucking losing every single game. If you're getting pumped every game, then the style matters less than the result.
Yeah, that's right. Doesn't matter how many chainsaws you juggle with the Gilbert,
And
if you're getting pumped.
And that's just it, right? So, I mean, he had a really, really dogged mindset about running, attacking rugby.
Well, this is a great segue, right? So that's my question. Is that kind of dogged mindset something that the Roosters want around the club? Because obviously it doesn't seem like we're struggling in terms of success. From what I understand, actually, and it was apparently at Robinson's invitation, that he's going to help out the club with attack in particular. I mean, is he going to be seen as an asset? I mean, you're really painting a picture of someone who has a mindset that could potentially be damaging. Is he too big a risk?
No, I mean, so to be fair to Cheika, I think he came across as being really belligerent through the World Cup in the last couple of years of rugby, and having disagreements with the exec and all the rest of it,
and the media.
Yeah, and that's right. Like the belligerence toward the media in particular. But that was because he was running the show. Some of the inside word is that he was trying to take the pressure off the playing group by making it all about himself. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. But ultimately, he was front and center as a kind of backroom advisor. Maybe it's not such a big deal. I mean, he's really just being asked for some ideas here and there. So I don't think it'll be damaging. But I also wonder, if he's after having a guy like Adam O'Brien who did such a stellar job with our attack, if there's going to be any improvement.
Well, it's interesting you say that about the attack, right? Because I've been pretty vocal on this show in suggesting that the Roosters, as amazing as they've been, I do think there's scope for improvement with our hands on the ball. I think particularly last year in the big pressure games, it was our defence entirely, I think, that really got us off the hook in a lot of those games. I think arguably, I know the stats might not necessarily back this up, but at least in the big games, I think, attacked better in 2018 than we did in 2019. We were exceptional in defence.
The stats don't back that up, though.
Yeah,
right?
I know. But again, I think I'm referencing when the going gets tough. I know that we had some huge wins against some pretty ordinary opponents at times.
It's fair.
Yeah, but I think in those big games, which were genuine contests, it was certainly our defensive line that we led with. We were very tight with the ball, I thought. But that's interesting. So he's come in to help work on the attack. So I actually think that he's come into an area where the club can improve, is what I'm saying. You wouldn't want someone to come in and meddle with our defensive mentality, that's for sure. But it strikes me that getting a guy that's just coached the Wallabies to this horrible chapter in history, to get him to come in and advise you on success. I don't know, it's a bit like asking Bradley John Murdoch to help identify some good road trips across the Red Centre. It just seems a bit weird, but that's just me.
What I do like about Cheika, and when he was the Waratahs coach, he was I think he had a relationship with Robinson back then.
Yeah, I think it goes back a few years.
And he grew up on league and union. He was like a lot of the sort of eastern suburbs kids. Like my brother was the same. He played both, growing up. And I think he genuinely, like Eddie Jones, who played in the same club with him in Union, they actually genuinely love rugby league as well. So they bring a lot of, they understand the game, and they probably, he's not going to be like a dyed-in-the-wool sort of, North Shore rugby type who would have no idea how to structure his advice or attack plans. He watches the game.
So not a complete alien to rugby league.
No, and he's cross-pollinated himself in Union.
Yeah, right. Well, that's interesting you mentioned Eddie Jones, because I was wondering if this is just another step in the sort of Cheika-Jones rivalry, because we know that apparently Eddie Jones got Ricky Stewart to observe a couple of his matches, England's matches
in the World Cup.
In the World Cup, exactly. So this idea of cross-pollinating the codes is not new, and we know that they have a bit of a rivalry. Is this just Cheika going, well, I can do it too, mate?
Well, no, I don't think it is. I think it's, because the invite came from Robinson, right? So it's
allegedly.
Allegedly. But they both do that a fair bit. I remember at the time when I heard about Ricky Stewart doing that, it pissed me off, because I kind of thought, well, that's exactly what Cheika should be doing. He should bring in guys like Robinson and Bellamy and all the rest of it to work with his side, instead of having the English take our coaching talent from the NRL.
Yeah. So he might be onto a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, this is my little thing. As a staunch rugby league man, I'm wondering, should the two codes even be fraternising like this? Because I love it when rugby union and rugby league just fucking hate each other. That's the status quo I want. And I don't like this idea of, inviting other people from the other side of the ledge in.
I'd share your sentiment, but I think rugby union is in such a poor state of health. Like, I mean, it really, at this point, it's like getting insights from touch football, frankly.
Well, I think that's a great point as well, Xander. So could this be seen as more of an act of charity on behalf of the NRL to let someone from the Rugby Union fraternity in and pretend to help? In the same way you might get someone who might have an intellectual disability, for example, to come and help with your accounts at the business. You give them a big crayon and a big bit of A3 paper.
I don't think you get them to help with your accounts. Maybe your meeting planner. I don't know.
Well, it's true though, because Rugby Union, as you've quite rightly identified, is struggling a little bit in Australia. I think
bit.
They've struggled. I think they're now the 57th most popular sport, just behind sheep drafting.
Fox have just sacked their chief rugby correspondent.
That's right. Was it
Nick McArdle?
Nick McArdle, right?
Yeah.
He got the boot.
Yeah, and he was genuinely good.
Well, I think they've put a bit of a cleaner through even a bit of rugby league. I heard Mark Gasnier has been moved on.
Yeah, but that's improving the product in the NRL.
That's a bit like delousing your hair, isn't it?
Like rugby are going to be, Nick McArdle was the sensible voice in the room. Now they're going to be, like stuck with Tim Horan, who can barely string two words together.
I'd like to apologise to McArdle for comparing him to Mark Gasnier.
I think you should. Like, it's like, I mean, the analogy would be like getting rid of Warren Smith.
Okay, yeah.
Right, a sensible, professional sportscaster who makes sure that the former football players keep on topic and don't eat each other,
Yeah, exactly. I actually quite enjoy the carnivorous aspect to ex-league players, but it's good that Warren Smith can keep them in line. Now, as we do on the show as well, Xander, we often put these very vexing topics out there to social media, and we asked our listeners, was the Roosters' decision to appoint Michael Cheika to its coaching staff a smart move? And 35.8% said yes, while 64% said no.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of anti-union sentiment still out there.
I think it could also just frankly be anti-Cheika sentiment because he rubbed so many people the wrong way toward the back end of last year.
Quite literally, I heard there was some bad hand jobs, which is a problem. Well, I just hope...
he's a cookie, I mean...
I hope I never meet him in person because he will thump me for saying that. And he seems quite strong.
Scary-looking man.
Well, I just hope he's more successful than Alan Jones, Xander, because when he came across to coach some league in the late 80s and early 90s. And I also doubly hope that Cheika avoids the fatal mistake of delivering team tactics while the lads were naked in the showers.
Yeah.
More after this. Welcome back to the Voluntary Tackle. Now, Xander, the chief executive of the new New York Rugby League franchise, which joins the British Rugby League competition this season, has reportedly made overtures to sign the controversial bushfire conspiracy theorist Israel Folau. They want to add him to their books, apparently. Now, a few news reports have been circulating that CEO Ricky Wilby, he hasn't tabled an offer to him formally, but has indicated he'd like to include him in the future. My question to you would be, would Folau accept a position playing in a comp which is quite a few divisions down from what he's been playing in rugby?
I suspect he'll accept the offer because he's not getting any others.
He'd play for anything right now,
I think he would, and he's been trying to get it back into any sort of playing contract for a while. I mean, he's got to top up that church fund his dad's clearly dipping into to expand their interesting little empire that they're building.
Is it fair to say that Israel Folau at this point, if he ends up accepting this offer, that he would have accepted an offer from basically anyone? I mean, would he have accepted a role as a coach for an over-80s women's balloon corps lawn bowl club, for example?
I think if they'd offered him the right amount of money, probably.
The right amount of tokens at the bar?
He's, him and his family, it seems to me, are clearly all about the money and screwing people over from everything we've seen. So I think he wouldn't. Then he probably just embarrass their organisation by posting a bunch of crazy shit online.
You could really close a few lawn bowl clubs down, couldn't he?
You never know. A lawn bowl membership, you might actually improve it.
You never know.
But I think it's appropriate though. I mean, if he like, how old is Folau now? He'd be what, 34?
In Jesus years, I think 59,000 BC.
He's going to be 31.
Wow,
so he's still got a couple of years
younger than I thought.
Yeah. He just has the haggard look of an old, poorly lived man. I don't know what's the term I'm looking for here. A man who hasn't looked after himself or his brain. So he's 31. If he plays this year, like he's probably got as a fullback, maybe 3 years left. So he could retire just making Division 1 Super League.
I mean, here's the thing. I know he's playing a few divisions down for a New York franchise if this deal goes ahead. But my question is, has he still got it? Because he hasn't played rugby league in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he'll. I don't think he'll have forgotten how to play footy over the course of the last 18 months. But you do have to wonder, right? Like, I mean, that conditioning, they said, oh, he's training, but it's not the same. You know yourself when you've played football. Like, it's not the same when you're just keeping fit for your own like general health. It is when you're training with a team.
Yeah, exactly. I know when I used to play competitive 10-pin bowling, I knew when I took a season off, especially under the air conditioning, I used to wilt. Particularly if it tried to pick up a 7-10 split, I didn't have it anymore. So I don't know if Folau will experience the same kind of challenges as I did.
I mean, it's probably in a funny sort of way though, playing like 3rd, 4th division British rugby league. You know, he'll look like a superstar regardless because he'll be playing against guys who have to get back to their shift at the bar.
Yeah, exactly.
after the match.
Who may have been recruited and they don't even know why yet.
Yeah,
they've been given some kind of $10 incentive to turn up.
So yeah, he's gonna look all right. But the thing is, that actually kind of supports your broader point because he'll play a couple of years against part-timers. Then he'll be 33, 34 by the time he hits the big time. Like, he'll have not played top-flight football since, basically 2018, really, because he barely played it, half the season for the Waratahs before he got sacked for being a fuckwit.
Will he be turning to Jesus to sort of recoup some of that stamina? I mean, if he starts to wilt under the sun and doesn't quite have the same level of skill that he used to have, could it be a case of he might actually bend his knee to the Almighty when he's playing? It'd
be interesting if he did that under the high ball.
I'd love to see it.
Just randomly closed his eyes and started praying instead of trying to catch it like he used to.
That's right. And then when it hit him in the head...
Some great Falcon opportunities, I'm sure.
Exactly. Now, I know that obviously the Toronto Wolfpack recruited Sonny Bill Williams, and he's a great player. I'm not putting him in the same category, but I think they obviously recruited him as well because he's an excellent marketing tool. One would imagine that it's not the same kind of marketing that you're going to get with Israel Folau for this new New York franchise. Was that part of their thinking? Surely it wasn't, right? Because he could only be a PR headache.
Yeah, I don't quite get it, to be honest. I think if the side was based out of Texas,
I was going to say
recruit somebody like Folau, but like cosmopolitan American cities like New York and San Francisco.
Not really his bag, is it?
Do you really want to, bring in the guy that hates the gays?
He could have thrived in Montgomery, Alabama, but I'm not sure about New York City, mate.
Yeah,
somewhere that's on the Bible Belt would have been a great brand fusion.
You're gonna generate some headlines, but I mean, if you're trying to win over a populace who've never watched the game before. Signing somebody who goes against the political current of that city seems a little bit of an interesting...
Could it be in marketing terms like when a brand tries to... They're already a niche sport in New York. Maybe they're trying to find the niche audience in New York, which would be the non-liberal, sort of gay-hating evangelicals. Is there potentially a marketing strategy behind this after all, is what I'm asking?
Oh, they've already got the Giants.
Oh, of course. That's right. So
actually,
there's no need for that at all.
If they wanted to be interesting, they should have tried to offer a contract to Colin Kaepernick.
Why didn't they do that?
The NFL aren't giving him a run.
Given the payout that Folau managed to weasel out of Rugby Australia as well, Xander, do you think at this stage he's just a rich enough man to simply purchase a team and play for that instead? Does he need to keep pitching his services when he has the money to actually create the team himself?
No, I suspect like those heavily religious families, I suspect he's lost a lot of that money already to his family and his church. Like I said, building an empire.
But isn't he the church? I mean, it feels like it's going into his central bank, isn't it?
It's his dad's, right?
It's all in the family, man.
Yeah, it is. But I remember reading something about him opening up parishes here and there, and
parishes inverted commas.
Yeah, it's redolent of Scientology, right? Like they're a religion, so they can raise money without being taxed.
Yeah, right.
Like because it's
a
weird
great loophole.
Yeah, it's a weird branch of Christianity. I don't know.
I'm now an independent contractor for God myself. It's fantastic. You can earn as much money as you want. Don't have to pay it back to anyone. And of course, if you end up molesting someone, you can get off that too. Not that I need that, by the way.
I was going to say, that's an interesting
it's just good
reason
to know it's there.
To go for the religion option.
Now, I mean, if he were to play for his own team or create his own team, what franchise would he likely create? I mean, for me, I don't know, he might create the Fremantle Folau Fuckwits, for example, and just kick around the ball with his straight gay-hating mates. I don't know what kind of crowd it would draw.
In Fremantle?
Well, if he does end up forming his own team, his own fundamentalist religious comp out of Fremantle, my advice is to forego the presence of ball boys on the sidelines. History has shown they don't mix well with the religious types. More after this. Welcome back to the voluntary tackle. Now, the Brisbane Broncos, Xander, have decided to strip Darius Boyd of his captaincy and instead give it to Alex Glenn. Here's what coach Anthony Seibold had to say when asked why he made the decision. He said, Darius did a terrific job as captain over the last 12 months in challenging times. But one thing I saw throughout the year was that for whatever reason, there was a lot of external noise and pressure around Darius, probably because he's shit. Ultimately, he handled it quite well, I thought, but I also thought it was pretty unforgiving. Darius is a legend of our club and a legend of our game, and I just wanted to take some of those commitments away. Now, was this a good move by the Broncos to dump him as captain? And despite what Seibold has just said, is that just a euphemism for Darius has been pretty poor?
I just loved that entire quote. I thought that was fantastic. I think it's obviously the right decision, but you gotta love when a coach or an employer or somebody like that gives somebody they've effectively demoted or sacked a huge rap and talked about how well they've done in the position, because the act is directly contradicting the explanation they're giving for it. I just think it's
proverbially called the shit sandwich, isn't it? Like when you go, look, and then you start off with a slight critique. What's been good, and then you finish off with a little compliment, or is it the other way around?
I think you start with a compliment, you move into a criticism, and then you finish with a compliment. That's right. That's the shit sandwich.
Yeah, although he didn't get much of the shit in that sandwich. It was mainly just bread.
The shit was the demotion, I think.
Exactly, the act itself. Now look, Seibold's also indicated, Xander, that Boyd's been one of the best trainers this pre-season. Do you think he might be onto something there, that Darius Boyd should just become a trainer instead and not a player? I mean, just let him do that full time. Just don't come on the field.
I think the Broncos would probably benefit from that.
I think so.
Just have him try and keep the tempo up for the players when they're training. I do love it when you do hear teams, they talk about how incredibly well they've trained in the off season and all the rest of it,
and then they get hammered round one.
It's just like it's such a meaningless thing to say. It's just
yeah, because it also implies that there are some teams that are just on the piss. I'm pretty sure they're all training hard. It's just whether or not they have good players most of the time.
I mean, not all of them are training hard. Latrell Mitchell wasn't training hard.
Exactly, there are exceptions. With Darius Boyd as well, I think one thing that comes to mind, it's a great decision to make if you're thinking about cutting him entirely from the team. Because obviously it's a lot harder to dump a player when he's your captain. So I'm thinking this could be the step one phase in terminating Darius Boyd's contract. Do you think that might be in thinking of the Brisbane Broncos up there? I don't think their future has him in their plans.
Well, it could be a little bit of a maybe he's taking a leaf out of Bennett's book and giving him a rap on the way to getting rid of him, like Bennett
loves that.
Yeah, like Bennett did with Adam Dewey at the back end of last season. Talked about what a wonderful player he was, and now he's just giving him the arse.
He was his great friend right up until he sacked him.
I wonder, because he is one of those players that has been a part of the club for he went to Newcastle and all the rest of it, but. I think he is still loved by a lot of the administration, but in that said, in hiring Seibold, they did show that they were willing to, I think, go for credentials over sentiment. Otherwise they would have given it to Kevin Walters or Wayne Bennett. Yeah, but they didn't. They went for data, right?
Yeah, this is sort of a bit of a turning point, I guess, in the Brisbane Broncos history, right? Because I think Alex Glenn, if I'm right, is the first captain of the club who didn't come from Queensland. He's a New Zealand-born player. So as much as I think Alex Glenn is a very good decision, actually, because he's one of those guys, he's a one-club player. I think he's played in excess of 260 first-grade games for the club. So he's an obvious choice. But I think historically, Brisbane have tended to go with, homegrown. So this is a sort of a bit of a fork-in-the-road moment for the club, maybe.
Well, they haven't had success for, since 2006. And they're
very nearly in 2015.
They did, yeah.
Big shout out to Ben Hunt.
in what was an incredible grand final, but yeah, they still haven't managed to crack it in almost 15 years. So you do have to start looking at the old ways of doing things and whether or not they're working anymore. And the knock on them has been that they're one sort of club town that. They're all rock stars up there, and they feel like they can't do anything wrong even when they suck because there's no competition.
I think a big part of that has been the success of the Melbourne Storm. I mean, as much as we say they're a one-club city, they're really not. They're really a two-club town because Melbourne Storm have all of their feeder tentacles enmeshed in the Queensland Cup. So as much as Brisbane used to get the fruits of that entirely, now it's sort of been split in two.
Oh, yeah.
So in a way, it's probably diluted their effectiveness a little bit, and obviously we can see the fruits of that down south of the border. But I really do genuinely think it is a turning point for the club. As you said, they've moved on beyond Wayne Bennett. I mean, who would have thought they'd ever proactively do that? I don't think necessarily it was the right call, actually, but they've done it anyway, and they seem to be moving in a different direction here with Darius Boyd on the chop. Do you think that Darius Boyd at this stage should go back to what he did for the rest of his career and just go back to trying to follow Wayne Bennett wherever he goes? Because ever since he hasn't been paired up with Wayne was the moment he became really, really shit.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I'd love to see him go down and take the fullback position at Souths from Latrell Mitchell.
You could see Wayne doing it, couldn't you? Go, I know we've paid a lot for you, Latrell, but my love child Darius needs to take your spot.
Love child.
He's definitely the backroom sprog, isn't he?
Yeah, something like that.
I feel like it was a Wayne Bennett affair like 30 odd years ago, and it's felt like a due diligence ever since. All right, let him in, and over time he's grown to love him. Now, it is horrible to see. Darius Boyd's obviously been a great player for a long time. I was a fan of him at one stage, just not in the last 3 seasons necessarily. And it is horrible to see a player go well past his best. We've seen it in other sports. We did it with Muhammad Ali. He went many fights too far, and we've seen the results of that. Except, obviously, Boyd's getting belted a lot more than he did. I'd say with his case, it's more like Phil Hughes batting on. Darius Boyd hasn't indicated that he's wanted to go of his own volition. I'm just wondering, in general terms, what do you think should be the signs a player goes, all right, I'm gonna actually hang up the boots myself here, even if I'm not pushed?
I think when they, frankly, when they stop, when it starts feeling like a chore to go to training, I think.
Yeah, a lot of players talk about that actually. Yeah, when they're
over it. Like, and you hear players who have retired, and I think like Darius, I don't know. I can't. You can't sort of speak for how he's feeling about it. But he played with a level of indifference in the last couple of seasons. It just looks like a guy who's not enjoying his footy and
100%
isn't as committed as he once was. So I don't know. Maybe it's the fact that genuinely he's got a young family now. Maybe other things are just more important to him, whereas football was everything to him previously, right?
Yeah.
So
that could be well it. And as you said, that training thing seems to be the first preliminary indicator for so many players, where one time they jumped out of bed because they were psyched to go there, and suddenly it becomes like work.
Yeah.
And with Boyd in particular, I've seen games where his body language was, I'm at work and I wish I was at home. I mean, last season in particular, there was about 2 or 3 occasions where someone had kicked through the ball. This is when he was playing at fullback, and he literally didn't put his body on the line because he could tell on his face, he went, that would hurt.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a lack of, their defence throughout the season wasn't great, and there was a lack of commitment, particularly from him on a number of efforts. And yeah, you do kind of wonder. I mean, the very fact actually that they're talking about how well he's training kind of tells you that he hasn't been training that well in the last couple of years, because you don't really bring up how well somebody's been training
unless you've got nothing else nice to say about them. Do you know, like that person who might be in a maths class and it's like, well, he's doing his homework.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he still can't do long division. If he's as dumb as shit.
If they're new to a club, they often talk about it, right? Like if a player's just come to a club and they hit the training paddock and they're just like, they're setting new levels for everyone else, then you comment on that. But for somebody who's been around for a while, it's why do you mention it? You know what he trains like.
I feel like it's part of that shit sandwich. It's to say something nice afterwards. I'm not entirely sure. Do you think that having back on Alex Glenn, do you think having a New Zealand-born captain will be a problem for the state of Queensland or Brisbane specifically? Do you think they'll take to that okay, not having a Queenslander there? They tend to be quite parochial kind of people.
It'll be one of those things where if they're doing all right, they won't give a shit. But if they aren't, it'll be all the Kiwis' fault.
Yeah, exactly. It'll suddenly be just rabid racism.
Yeah, and you see that in Australia more broadly. Like, frankly, I remember not to jump to the enemy code, but Union, when they had their last Kiwi coach, Robbie Deans, he was copping all kinds of criticism for not being able to beat the All Blacks, to the point where they were saying that he was like a Kiwi plant.
Like the
ignoring
Manchurian candidate.
Yeah, ignoring the fact that no one had beaten the Kiwis in Australia for 20 years. And so,
it's not really his fault, right?
no, but it was back then when they were
Yeah.
losing. So you do wonder about that kind of sentiment. It seems to cut across sports, like
So
Kiwis.
potentially that the whole
Yeah.
city of Brisbane could turn on Alex Glenn.
They'll run him out of town and tell him to go back to the Warriors or something.
Will they all hop on one of those old like station wagons with the pitchforks in the air? I hope they do, because that's my
mental image of Brisbane as well.
Exactly. My only final thought is, should they bring back Wally Lewis, one of the great captains, just to ease them through this period?
To play or to mentor? I just wasn't sure.
I'm wondering, even at his age, they might just need someone who's a genuine leader.
I'd love to see it.
He could do the Cooper Cronk for Brisbane. And especially, I tell you what, he's got a
slightly different playing areas.
I tell you what, he has a hell of a sidestep mid-seizure. Welcome back to the voluntary tackle. The Wests Tigers, Xander, who knew they signed someone? In fact, they signed a few people, all from the same family, as it turns out. The Leilua brothers, not to be confused with other sets of brothers in the circus world. They are a rugby league playing group of brothers. I should say pair of brothers. Now, the first one was Luciano Leilua, who went from the Dragons. They signed him a little while ago, and it's just been confirmed this morning that they've officially landed the signature of Joey Leilua, which will certainly give them some grunt, quite literally. He does grunt like a wild animal at times.
Like a wombat, I think. He kind of looks a bit like one, doesn't he?
A little bit, yeah. Often he looks a bit like roadkill in defence as well. So there's a lot of symmetries between Joey Leilua and wombats. But I guess to come back to the Wests Tigers specifically, is this a good move to sign these brothers?
Oh, absolutely it is.
Is that just because they needed to sign someone?
I think like Joey in particular is one of the genuine strike centres in the competition. Probably, he'd have to be one of the best easily in the top 2 or 3.
He's got the strength of 8 men.
He does.
There's no doubt about that.
Like, it's a worry for the Raiders, right? Like, that they've lost him because I think he was such a big part of their success throughout 2019.
Look, we've talked about it. He's got he's a double-edged sword in a way, Joey Leilua, isn't he? Because he can be so destructive. But he can also be really ill-disciplined.
Yeah, he can cost you a little bit, can't he?
Yeah, I don't know if Canberra fans have the same opinion of him or not, but I imagine if I was following the Green Machine, that I would have mixed feelings about Joey Leilua leaving.
Yeah, I think in 2018 he was still that kind of rocks and diamonds player where he would cost you as much as he'd gain you, but I think in 2019 he was more diamonds.
Okay, I like that.
You know what I mean?
Fair enough. Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I think he was far more disciplined last year.
He didn't cost them, there were clangers in 2018 where they lost so many games in the last 2-3 minutes.
Although arguably did lose them at GF.
Yes.
I can say there was a couple of really key moments in that game, and they were all Leilua related.
That is true, but they still got within a whiskey, didn't they? And they were split second things. They weren't absolute clangers. The draw and pass obviously almost qualifies it, but it's not like missing a critical try-saving tackle.
No, and it wasn't overt disciplinary issues. In seasons gone by, Joey Leilua would make your team lose by shoving his penis in the nostril of an opposition player and just repeatedly thrusting.
That.
Unfortunately, the video refs didn't, that's for sure. So he spent a bit of time on the sideline over the years doing just daft things that were unnecessary. They weren't even bringing the aggression in a way that was needed. It was kind of dog acts, in the ruck, throwing a bit of a jab here or kneeing on someone's neck.
Stupid shit like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think to a degree, Joey Leilua actually did get that out of his game last year. So if the Tigers can actually be the beneficiary of Canberra reining him in, and if anyone, someone made the point online over the weekend that if anyone can rein him in, surely it is Madge Maguire, the ultimate disciplinarian who's second only to Hitler when it comes to making a team very regimented and do horrendous things.
Yeah, underrated coach in the NRL, Hitler.
I think he could get the troops moving. He'd go very well on the overseas trips to Israel.
He would just, he just bite off more than he can chew.
Now, there's just a bit of a turning of the corner moment for the Tigers, who have a checkered history here with signings. They managed to sign a good person only fairly recently, and he's left for Parramatta in the form of Ryan Madison. He had a breakout season, really, for the Tigers last year, and then he fucked off straight away. It was almost as though that's not supposed to happen at the Tigers. This could be a bit of a turning of the corner, I would imagine, because I actually think Luciano Leilua, we should talk about him as well, has been very good for the Dragons and has been getting better year on year. The Dragons, on the other hand, they've got to be screaming that they've lost him, because he's one of those few shining lights at a club that's struggling at the moment, surely.
Yeah, I think it's a huge positive for the Tigers, because it also kind of solves that problem that they were. I mean, they were nominally trying to sign Latrell for fullback.
That's right.
But Leilua, arguably almost as good at centre, and maybe like last year, I think he's probably a little bit more consistent. Latrell had the better, obviously, in the grand final.
Yeah,
he managed to pull off the flick pass while Leilua didn't. It's been a good recovery after that debacle with Mitchell.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And if there's one criticism that's been made of the Tigers over the last couple of years, is that they may have just lacked that bit of strike power out wide. They've always been a decent team, but decent doesn't win you comps, obviously. In fact, it makes you finish ninth every year, apparently. So to have a player out there who's a genuine game breaker, which Leilua is, one way or the other, sometimes he'll break your team.
Yeah.
But he is a game breaker, and I think Luciano's going to add a lot of grunt to the pack as well. So for me, I'd say it's a pretty positive move, even though I like making jokes about Joey Leilua. Because, he has had a checkered history off the field as well. That's the reason I tend to be a little bit harsher on him, because he's done some pretty bad things to women at times.
Yes.
But, forgive and forget to a certain degree. But yeah.
I don't know if we should really end done bad things to women with forgive and forget. Somehow I just feel like that's not going to play well on social media.
It was very. I think I am a believer in rehabilitation. That's all.
That's better. I think we'll go with I'm a believer in rehabilitation rather than forgive and forget.
Now we're talking Penrith Panthers, Xander, because we're doing our little thing where we try to examine how a team's going to go in 2020, and we've been going from the bottom of the ladder up to the top of the ladder. We're up to the humble Penrith Panthers, who, it must be said, didn't have the happiest season last year. It was certainly a fall from grace on the previous year. We're going to start with you this time. How do you think they're going to fare this year?
So I'm on record as saying I thought they'd make sixth when I put together my very poorly researched 2020 prediction ladder.
Because you've had a bit of a backflip on that, haven't you?
Some parts of it. As I've actually gone through and tried to logically look at teams to see how they might do based on the players they've gained and lost, I've tended to look back at my ladder and go, geez, that was a bit silly. But I should note for the listeners out there that exercise was largely just an excuse for me to have Souths last.
That's right.
Not sure if anyone picked up at the light sarcasm in the numbering of the teams there, but yeah, it wasn't an entirely well-informed list.
You did cause a fair bit of consternation on Twitter by putting Souths. In fact, you managed to garner a few death threats for the show, which was our first. I quite enjoyed those.
One specifically from Russell Crowe.
That's right.
I thought it blocked me, but
he's still reading you through one of those burner accounts, it seems. So, I mean, the Penrith Panthers. I mean, we've touched on the fact that they didn't have a happy season last year, and I think one big part of that was because they basically started off the year by turning the club into Pornhub for a month. I don't know if you remember that. There was just leaked videos all over the shop of, sex incidents, some of them leading to alleged crimes. Not the kind of platform you want to build into a season. So surely 2020, so far, touch wood, that nothing like that has happened so far. So that should be a good thing, at least.
That is a good thing. Losing your key playmaker, couple of key forwards, losing, guys like Waka Blake.
No Regan Campbell-Gillard.
Yeah, no Regan. I mean, debatable how much of a loss that is given the form he was in, but their losses are more pronounced than their gains, as far as I can see. No off-field controversy, but I kind of worry about their spine, and picking up Zane Tedavano is going to help them up front. I think that's a great
good pickup.
That's going to effectively solve fill the gap that Campbell-Gillard.
Yeah. Look, and he wasn't putting in. I mean, last year was a very unhappy season for Campbell-Gillard as well, by his own words, I believe. So,
specifically for his moustache.
Yeah, I think that alone, right? We made the comment before that he hasn't been right since he broke his jaw.
Yeah.
I think it was a Roosters game a couple of seasons ago. He's never really come back the same player. This is a guy who's played Origin, so we know he can be good. And there's also a bit of a word behind the scenes that Campbell Gillard wasn't exactly a great cultural mix at the Penrith Panthers. Maybe because he wasn't thrusting his penis into a woman's vagina. I'm not sure if that was the reason or not. Not at least on a mobile phone.
I'm really not sure. Sorry, when you say cultural mix, it's probably not the first thing that comes to mind for me. But look, let's roll with it. I would have said that maybe he looked more like the kind of guy that just wouldn't have copped Nescafe, and that seems to be more a cultural thing from out west in my experience.
Yeah, fair enough.
No offense, Westies. He has hipster written all over him, that bloke, and I just think that that's probably more the and look, I'm sure that he enjoys thrusting his penis into a consensual woman's vagina as much as the next bloke.
Exactly.
But I think the coffee's probably more...
That's more of a stickling point for you. No, fair enough too. And look, as you said, they've got a couple of gains, but let's talk about their losses first. So they've also lost James Maloney. Now, for me, this is their biggest loss. One that maybe people tend to underrate a little bit. I think people, because he's so jovial and a bit of a prankster, I think people tend to not quite give Maloney his dues when it comes to being how an effective playmaker he is. So it really does stack up a whole lot of pressure on Nathan Cleary, who people have been saying, he's ready to pop, he's getting pretty close. Yeah. People were kind of thinking that might have happened last year. And arguably, it didn't really, did it? Yeah. I mean, he's a good player, but he hasn't burst out yet. Do you think he has the potential, or is he one of these guys that's consigned to being overrated?
Oh, I think he's too young to start saying that. He has played Origin. He's played an important part in some big Origin games. But I do wonder how he's going to go without a mature playmaking partner like Maloney out there, who not only helps direct traffic and provide that the real structure for the side, but also I think takes a bit of the pressure off the side just because of his Maloney is won games for the Panthers during his time there, purely on his game management alone. When he's on, he's just incredible. So I think Cleary is not at that level of maturity to be able to read games to that level and make those kinds of mature decisions.
Yep.
And so I just wonder how that's going to play out.
I agree with you, mate. And they've got that. I think they're thinking this guy Jerome Luai is going to be the person who fills that hole. Now, he's been one of these guys. I had a real good look at him last year because he's had a lot of raps on him, and I've been somewhat disappointed by what I've seen. He's an extremely energetic player. He's very reactive, so he plays a lot off the top of his head. But in terms of having that constructive game management role, he's nothing like Maloney. So that's really going to be all on the shoulders of a Nathan Cleary, you'd imagine, while if he is to be effective, Jerome, then it's going to be more in a running role where he hopefully tees up something on the edge. But I don't know if he's the guy for that role, personally.
And that's my concern, is basically what they've done is said that Cleary is going to be the guy who's going to be the game manager, and that's why I'm a bit concerned, is I don't know if he's really there yet.
We know he handles pressure. He never seems flustered, but maybe that's part of the problem, because when the game's there for that moment to be had, he's sort of been found moving very casually in the back play, and at Origin level, you could probably argue that he's deferred a lot of that game management to his halves partner, which was Maloney for some portion of that. So this will have to be the year, I think, where he goes up to another level before people really start criticising him pretty heavily. If he managed to do that, Chin the younger, then Chin the elder will be very happy with him. Ivan Cleary, speaking of Chin the elder, is Ivan Cleary still the man for the job? I always felt that was a bad move bringing him back.
Yeah, I did too. I think just internally within the club, it just felt like such a clusterfuck with all the things that were happening with Gould in the background. I don't know what really happened there. I mean, there were a lot of sort of stories each way about that, but it's not good, I think, for a club to have that kind of conflict.
Yeah. It struck me as a 0-0 draw. Yeah. It was like Gould versus Hook in a match, and Gould knifed Hook, and then Gould got knifed himself.
Yeah, and I think in that situation, it's not so much a draw as both
losing. Yeah, exactly.
You know
well,
what
the
I mean?
club definitely lost.
The club loses as well because it's. I don't think you instill confidence in the decision-making process when that's what happens.
I agree with you, mate. And if anything, the Panthers are going to have a level of stability this year, you'd hope, that they definitely didn't have last year. Because, leading up to last year, there were so many promising signs that this was a club on the move. They were a whisker away from making some GFs. So last year was a major disappointment. And we even saw personal form of a lot of players drop. We had Zalesniak abandon ship midway through the year.
Yeah.
Gillard didn't give a shit anymore. People like Mansour, who had been so brilliant, suddenly look flat and disinterested. I really hope that that's sort of a hurdle that they're going to leave in the rear vision mirror, but I have some doubts about it, particularly because I don't think Ivan is the man for the job. If we're going to move on to something a little bit more positive, the man that I'm looking to this year to be my player's player, who had a great year last year, was Viliami Kikau. I think he's a shining light for the Penrith Panthers. He also blitzed it in the internationals at the end of last year. He's one of these guys that has an unnatural level of ball skill for his size. He almost plays like a 5'8", but he's built like Jared Warrior-Hargraves.
Yeah, right.
And he's faster than him. So he could be absolutely devastating for them. In fact, there's even some talk that he might play some 6. That's how talented he is with the ball in his hands. So for me, Kikau could be the one to watch to have the best year on record. What are your thoughts about him?
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't followed Kikau as closely, so I hadn't really even paid that much attention. But that's promising. I think if he's a genuine prospect of playing 6 and can have a stabilizing role, then maybe they have a spine that'll make more sense.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I hope so because I put them at 6.
And we did also put it out to Twitter that we asked how the Penrith Panthers would perform in 2020. 1.3% said they'd be premiership winners. 28.6% said they'd make the finals. An overwhelming 62.3% said they'd miss the finals. And just under 8% said they'd get the wooden spoon. So, again, I don't know if there's a huge amount of optimism in the room for the Penrith Panthers, but I do think they're going to be better than last year, surely.
You'd hope so. So I know we had our agenda all set and ready to go, Eamon, but this morning you might have seen there's been some breaking news with Curtis Scott apparently having been arrested overnight for an incident at the SCG. Did he
streak?
Well, no, but he might have left a few streaks because apparently he was awoken in the early hours of this morning by a couple of police officers, and his first reaction was to push one away and then punch the other in the face, as you do.
Well, if they're going to wake me up in the middle of the night, I think that's what they deserve.
Having a nice nap in the evening, just leave me alone.
Did they wake him up in his own home? What happened there?
No, he was on the turf of the SCG.
Oh, he actually was. No, so they woke him up on the turf?
Yeah.
What was he doing there?
I think I can't. He was sleeping. but
there's a lot of questions in this story.
So the story goes that yes, he pushed one away and punched the other in the head. So the police did what they would normally do in Australia, and tasered him. In America, they'd probably have shot him
or bashed him like Rodney King.
Yeah,
if he was black.
That's right. He's too pale for that, so they tasered him.
Yeah.
Which to me, whilst troubling, is also kind of hilarious, just the image of Curtis Scott being tasered somehow. But anyway, so
I hear Bellamy used to do that to him when he defended Paulie.
And apparently tasered directly into the testicles too.
It's the only way they'll learn, mate.
But so anyway, apparently he spent a bit of time locked up over that. Not a great start for his incoming season for the Canberra Raiders, who just let Leilua go.
Isn't the timing of this absolutely horrible for the Raiders? So they've just, the day before, officially let go of Leilua to the Tigers, their centre, who they wanted to play on for this year. They've got Curtis Scott in that same position, think he'll fill it, and he's gone ahead and punched a police officer in the head.
That's right. Well, allegedly.
Allegedly,
we should say. The funniest thing is, though, that when you read the article on the Nine Press, it goes through, what the report of the incident was, him pushing the one officer, punching the other, and then having an electricity-induced seizure. Then it goes to quote some recent things he'd said in an interview back at the back end of last year, and it's just funny because he talks about being much older and more mature and making better decisions, and it's just such a perfect juxtaposition between one of the funnier off-field incidents. Not funny for the police who got punched in the face, heroes out there.
Yeah, but it's a great drinking story, though, isn't it? I got punched in the face by the same guy who bashed Dylan Walker. I mean, that's something you can go straight to the pub with. And then you tasered him in the balls. So you go, I got him back. It's fine.
It did get me thinking. And we run these thought bubbles each week. You have an interesting thought bubble every week. And I thought I'd put forward a thought bubble.
Oh, I love this. Because my thoughts are terrible. This is great.
I think that they would genuinely add to the sport, generally speaking. But anyway, here's my thought bubble. I like the idea of maybe just arming a player each week, in secret, a little bit like the sort of golden mouth guard thing we spoke about previously. But just to sort of add a bit of spice to the defence, you just give one player a taser.
Okay, just one out of all of the players.
That's right.
Okay, and you don't know who has the taser?
Exactly, and it's got to be a defensive set.
Okay, you can't use it when attack.
Exactly. I mean, I feel like it would be a bit unfair if say, Latrell Mitchell could be, tasering instead of palming people.
Because you wouldn't want the idea to be outrageous or anything.
Exactly. I mean, let's keep it within reason.
Give it some regulation.
Yeah.
No, that's great. So one player, they hand out the taser randomly.
That's right.
What do they do? A lucky dip or something?
Something like that.
Okay, right.
And I hadn't thought that far ahead, actually.
How can it be administered? That's what I would want to know. So is it something where you can repeatedly shock an opposition player into a cardiac arrest, or is it just a one-off shot? And you have to keep it below the neck, assume, because otherwise that would be a head high. You can't do that.
Yeah, I think so. I think for the purpose of the gimmick, let's just say, I don't want to limit it to one zap. I think it should be. I think it should be repeat.
Yeah, fair enough. A good sort of LAPD zap.
That's right.
12.
Or a Curtis Scott zap.
As it turns out.
As it turns out.
Wow. Well, I love your idea, and what I particularly love about that is you managed to do a seamless segue from Curtis Scott's arrest into a thought bubble. Now, how many volts would you like this taser to be? Standard procedure.
I again hadn't thought that far ahead.
Should it be a lethal amount of volts?
But I think it should be. I think it should be below lethal because I do think we want it. We want the game to continue to have players.
No, I love it. And look, just to counter your idea there, because we'll have multiple thought bubbles on today's show. My one for this episode was the idea of substitutions. So I thought it'd be a great idea, instead of having regular rugby league players come on the field every time, was for 5 minutes a match, we sub on a celebrity. So every club would have their own nominated celebrity that they had to put on for a minimum of 5 minutes. If you wanted to play them the whole match, fair enough. They're allowed to do that. But presumably, they're not rugby league players. They don't really know about the game, and they'd get seriously injured.
Well, I do have a question, though. The celebrities that are going to be subbed on, do they get a say in the matter?
No, it's completely non-consensual.
Okay.
Yeah, so they get abducted in the middle of the night,
right.
A bit like what you do as a Mossad agent. You'd put a big sack over their head, drag them away from their family who are crying, drive them off to, say, Belmore, and you go, by the way, this is kickoff. Get your ass on there. You're now playing prop.
I would, why this idea speaks to me so much is because I think it would just be fantastic for us to kidnap Russell Crowe for this purpose, have him play in the Roosters up front, and just get him to mark Sofa Solomona.
Wow, so Sofa Solomona could effectively rip his head off faster than a guy in Bali. I love the idea of that. So, and the best part, you, just as a bit of an ironic punishment, you'd make him play Souths at some point as well, wouldn't you?
That would absolutely get him to Mark Latrell.
Yeah, like when the owner of a group of hungry dogs gets torn apart by his own canines. A bit like that. Because this was the team he built from the ground up, only for Burgesses to stomp on his head. No, I love that idea. And in fact, we loved it so much, we decided you'd never guess this. We put it out to Twitter. And we gave people 4 options about which celebrities they'd love to see non-consensually subbed onto a rugby league match. And we had the options of Kevin Rudd, Greta Thunberg, Quentin Bryce, or Clive Palmer. Now, what an eclectic bunch of people that is, because we wanted to cover all bases. And Xander, I'm going to give you the option of guessing, because you don't know the answer to this yet. Who do you think ranked at 52.2%?
It's a hard one depending on the demographic of this, but I'm going to go with Clive Palmer.
Clive Palmer came in second, mate.
Right.
So you kind of know your listeners. That's not bad. 39.1% said Clive. Quentin Bryce copped a big fat duck egg. No one went for her. 9% for Kevin Rudd, and overwhelmingly Greta Thunberg, 52.2%. Now, we've also got some commentary below this and some reasons why Greta was chosen.
Right.
This comes from Aaron Ugol at Alge247. He said, definitely Greta, just to hear her say, how dare you, to the referee when they penalised her. Well, we've come to the end of the show, Xander. It's the time where I get very depressed because we switched the microphones off and I don't get to talk about footy for another probably 8 minutes because I talk about it relentlessly to my wife anyway. We'd just like to thank our listeners for hanging in there. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to impart upon our listenership?
So my final thoughts for the podcast today are that if we were to add an additional incentive for fans
of the game or us?
For fans of the game,
yep.
to stay or to attend matches. Really don't know where I'm going with this.
See you next time.
I was about to say, no, I have no final thoughts for this episode of the Voluntary Tackle.
Well, look, thank you very much for listening, everybody, and managing to get to the end, if indeed you are here. Big shout out to you for making it. If you'd like to subscribe and comment on the show, you can on Apple Podcasts. We're also on Google Play, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, a few of those other ones, I'm not even sure. But you can also get involved with us on Twitter. We're at the handle @Voluntary Tackle. Please reach out with some advice, with some abuse, or even just with a dick pic. Doesn't really matter. Until next time, just do what an angry stingray would do and show the humans who's the boss, circa 2006. See you next time. Well, that's right. Before we go today, we couldn't let everyone leave without our iconic mascot war. And this time around, Xander, we're going to let you introduce yours, and then I'm going to introduce mine, and we're going to let them do battle. Count of three. Give us yours. 1, 2, 3.
Boston Celtics, Lucky the Leprechaun.
Okay, that's shit. Okay, I might be in trouble. Mine's the Coogee coronavirus, which is kind
I
of
think Lucky's in trouble, actually. I think you win this one.
All right, can you walk us through yours first?
Well, he's a leprechaun.
Okay, yes, and he's lucky, is he?
Yes,
lucky at what?
Right.
Gambling, or does he pick up lots of women?
I think it covers all bases. You know, probably lucky in sport, lucky in getting his pot of gold.
I love it. Yep.
You know, all that kind of thing. You're just lucky in life.
Okay, fair enough. Now, when you're lucky, does that assume that you're not universally lucky, right? Even people who are lucky eventually get run over by a tram.
No, you're universally lucky.
Okay, so you're lucky your entire life.
That's right, yeah.
You can't
You never
lose.
die.
So you're invulnerable. I think you've got a very unusual interpretation of lucky, Xander. I don't know if lucky covers off on being completely invulnerable to everything.
The Domino from Deadpool form of lucky.
Okay, well, that's going to be obviously a tough ask to beat as a mascot. Now,
that said,
how has the coronavirus been in Ireland is probably my first question, because if it's been fairly prominent or even an isolated case, my Coogee coronavirus mascot might have a chance.
So the question I have for you is you've kind of neutered yourself from the get-go there.
Okay.
It's because the coronavirus that is currently damaging the world is from Wuhan.
Yes.
What I'm saying is that I think that Lucky's immune system is going to fight you off without a trouble.
I have the feeling that once Lucky catches and is exposed to my Coogee coronavirus, it will make him eject all forms of gold through every orifice, because I imagine Leprechaun's bloodstream is just gold.
That's right.
So they will be
gold coins as well,
hemorrhaging from the eyeballs, and eventually he'll asphyxiate on gold coins. I just wanted to say a quick minute's tribute to the life and career of Kobe Bryant, who was tragically killed in a helicopter crash earlier today. I know I speak for everyone when I ask, why couldn't it have been Greg Norman?